The bell was ringing for the first day of school, and she comes sweeping through the door in all of her glory, and I couldn't help but notice her. There was just a life about her, just exuded joy, exuded confidence, exuded beauty.
It was love at first sight when LeRoy met Kim at Bible college. He fell in love with her joyful enthusiasm, and she fell in love with his quiet strength. Soon, they were engaged.
I really went into marriage thinking this was just going to be a great 50-year date. I just thought, oh wow, now we get to be together all the time and it's just going to be so fun.
But the fun ended 3 days into their honeymoon. After a long drive to the mountains, Kim settled in for a night of romance.
And he falls asleep on me. I mean, we had barely hit the bed and he falls asleep.
I was awakened by her cries. I didn't really think that was that big a deal, so I thought, she'll get over that.
I'm like shocked, like, why doesn't that devastate you that I'm letting you know how you hurt me?
That pattern continued through the early years of their marriage. When expectations were met with disappointment, Kim would express strong emotion, and LeRoy would dismiss her or withdraw. What first attracted them to each other was now driving a wedge between them.
I loved LeRoy, but at the same time, I could be so repulsed by him.
I was raised to not be emotional.
I could be so upset with him and disappointed.
And so instead of having the tools to handle that, I would just shut down.
I kept wanting him to just, stand up and be a man.
It made me feel like that I could never measure up. It brought out what I'd always feared, and that was not being able to do what I knew that I should do as a man.
I just saw being a helper to LeRoy as helping him do things in a better way.
And so the further that I would retreat into sullenness or passivity or into a cave, the more intense that she would become.
Kim gave birth to a daughter, but 5 years into their marriage, they reached a breaking point.
I still remember the intersection where we were sitting in the car when he looked over at me, and I had been pressuring him, but he looked over and he just admitted,
evidently, I've not been able to love you like I should. You've made that perfectly clear. I don't know how to do that, and so I guess I don't love you.
I was devastated, and yet I wasn't that surprised.
As Christians, LeRoy and Kim didn't believe in divorce. Their son was born a few years later, but then they lived as roommates for the next 8 years while raising their children. Kim could no longer endure the pain and went away to a cabin to read the Bible and pray about her marriage.
And God used scriptures to take me on a journey of revisiting my life and convicting me where I'd harmed LeRoy, where I'd been intimidating, cruel even at times. And I began writing out just instance after instance that God brought to mind.
Kim then asked LeRoy to join her at the cabin.
And then when she called me, wanted to share with me what the Lord had spoken to her about, I was so dead emotionally. I didn't really have any response at all.
That was okay, because God had done such a deep work in me. I wasn't obeying God in how I treated my husband to get my husband to treat me a certain way. I was focused on loving him more than I was getting love from LeRoy.
Kim had changed, but their marriage stayed the same. 2 years after Kim's time away, LeRoy went on a retreat of his own to ask God to examine his heart.
And God very strongly dealt with me and took me back to the earliest moments of my memory as a boy, that fear had been in control of my life. I was afraid of not fulfilling my responsibilities. I was afraid of failing those who looked to me. And so this had greatly impacted my marriage relationship with Kimberly. And I apologized to her, and I said, so much of my interaction with you and so much of my hurt and pain has not been because of the way you've been. It's been because of where I have been long before I met you. And that began our walk together as broken, humbled, repentant, but hopeful that God was at work in our marriage and began that process of restoration.
LeRoy and Kim began living as husband and wife again. That was in 1999, and today their marriage is stronger than ever. Together they counsel other couples with the hope they've been given by the God of second chances.
He's restored our marriage. It is a happy marriage. It's a blessed marriage. It's a fun marriage. When I look back and I see what I would have missed had I checked out, had I have divorced, I shudder to think of all of the blessings, of all that God had in store if I would have walked away, if I would have stopped short of enduring and persevering and trusting Him.
My husband is my best friend. He's who I would want to hang out with more than anyone else. I admire him and I adore him. I could have never imagined how good it could be